Okay, I'll just start by quickly introducing, hopefully you've all sat in the right order. So I'll start with Jason Howarth, founder and chief product officer of Veya. We've got Duncan Samuel, executive chairman of Gazelle. We've got Phil. Now, hopefully I'm going to pronounce your surname correctly, Phil. Is Natush?
Spot on, yeah.
Correct. Thank God for that. MD at Mio. Then we've got Ben Ridgway, who is Managing Director of I Am Property, followed by another Ben Robinson, MD at Landmark Estate Agency Services, and last but certainly not least, Paul Saunders from Legal Eye. So, Ian, they're all yours.
Thank you very much indeed. First thing to say, Dan, that was a brilliant speech, and thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
It was really informative, very eye-opening. I took away from that he's never been to a garden centre, because he would know clearly that it was called a garden centre, not a garden place. So I don't know who does the gardening in your home. Hands up in the room who hasn't got a mobile phone. Nobody. I just find it really interesting that 20, 30 years ago, the people that had vision about technology bought all of the satellite space and paid billions of pounds for it, knowing the direction of travel. The car industry is now, everything is online in the car industry. And that's happened within our eyes. One year I went to the post office to update my tax. The next year it was all online. And it just happened seamlessly, right in front of my eyes, without any realization that it was happening. But because we're so ingrained in the property sector, there are certain people that say, that's never going to happen to me. It's not going to happen in this space. It won't work. This panel is here to challenge that view. So, we're going to start with Jason.
Yep.
So, elevator pitch, 10 seconds, maybe 15 or 20 seconds. Tell us what your company does, please.
So Veya is a title analysis tool that helps agents understand some of the risks, opportunities, and issues that are probably going to come further down the line.
That was pretty good timing, so thank you very much. That just gives you a bit of insight. So if you could, the first question is, can technology really help improve agents, conveyancers, relations, and ultimately speed up the transactions in the end? So what's your answer to that, please?
Yes, absolutely. And we're seeing that as probably everybody on the panel is. I've come from a financial background as well, so what you see, I saw that innovation start to come through, and through my own pains and tribulations of trying to buy property, now we can see that actually that technology, it's an enabler, just like an agent, just like a conveyancer, just like a lender. We're all enablers in that chain. But what technology is doing is just helping breaking down some of those barriers. So, like in our case, it helps an agent understand, listen, this is going to be an issue. We can start to address it now before it even gets to the conveyancer. So 100% yes. And
so your product in itself, how would that, me as a lowly estate agent, what's the practical implication?
So you get a valuation come through.
Yeah.
You run the Veya, so initially you understand, whether that property is registered or not on the first, and then it will start to tell you things like at a high level. So maybe there's a charging order. Maybe there's maybe part of your garden's been sold off to somebody. So you can sit there and at the coffee table moment and just come across as that point of knowledge holder. Because as a vendor, the only reason I'm not going to instruct you is if I'm not confident that you can't sell my house.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the only thing. So coming across with that knowledge and saying, listen, we're the agent that does know a little bit more. I do understand what your property is. And when you're doing the memo of sales, we can pass this information over to the conveyancer. So it kind of just gives everybody a little bit of a leg up along the line.
So agents are instructed because of trust 88% of the time, according to Peter Knight's data at the Property Academy. And so how could that then benefit the communication or the relationship between conveyancers and agency? So
what it enables then is that when they're doing the phone calls and they're talking to conveyancers, it's a meaningful phone call. It's not just chase, my customer saying we've got to exchange on Friday. It's, okay, we understand there's a deed of trust involved, right? What do we need to do? What documents do we need to obtain? Can you help us? And so it just speeds up that conversation and the transaction.
Okay, last question before moving on. Do you genuinely believe that the client or the customer, depending on which side of the fence you're on, actually cares about technology in the home moving process?
Yes.
Why?
go back to smartphone analogy, you know, everything's doing online. So my kids who are coming up now, my lad's 18, he's looking at buying a house. He's going, why can't I just go to Amazon and, you know, Dad, why can't I do that? So the technology piece, that's where he's looking first. He's, you know, the concept of phoning 3 agents at the minute is just not there in his head.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Good answers. Duncan, over to you. Same question, please.
Well, what we do is we gather all of the information up front from the seller at the point at which the property is listed that would normally be collected by the seller's conveyancer after an offer is accepted. We make all of that information available to the buyer before they make an offer, and that engenders trust because there is the transparency and openness on the part of the seller, and then at that point we invite the buyer and seller to enter into a reservation agreement. In doing so, they're making a commitment one to the other. They will not pull out of the agreement unreasonably, as defined within the agreement, and that ties both parties in. One of the great things about it is that, unlike a normal reservation agreement, where one or both parties, but usually just the buyer, has to put down a deposit, neither party has to put down a deposit. The agreement is completely mutual. Both parties make, if either party withdraws, then they're due to pay that money to the other. But rather than anybody having to put down a deposit, Gazelle will guarantee that amount to the other party.
Okay, and again, in terms of how does that pass on in terms of to the conveyancer or lawyer?
Effectively, what we're doing by gathering all the information about the title and all of the information that goes into the Law Society transaction protocol forms and all of the information that they would need to provide that's supplemental to that, like offencer certificates and with guarantees and warranties and planning permissions and everything, you've effectively put together what is, to all intents and purposes, a contract pack, but obviously without the contract, because we're not conveyancers and we're not able to draft the contract.
Right. And is that...
So it accelerates that process hugely. So normally, if once the standard time for a conveyancer to get out a contract pack is about 2 weeks to get it out to the buyer's conveyancer. We've prepared all of that information up front, and that can be sent straight the way through on the secure key.
And is that widely accepted in the room?
It's used by a number of agents. I know there are a number here today who are using us, and yes, so that works very well.
Okay. That's good. So, and do you have any data that shows an agent in the living room pitching your product, how that's going to increase their conversion rates?
A lot of agents that we work with use the transparency and particularly the certainty, the idea that, look, we are different because when we find you a buyer, we combine that offer in so that you can rely upon it. They find that a very good way of winning instructions. Okay. It's also worth noting we charge nothing to put together the whole contract pack at all. We only charge at the point at which they enter into the reservation agreement, which is a fee for us simply to guarantee the commitment that each party makes to the other. Okay,
thank you very much. That is Gazelle. That's great. I didn't ask you the intro, but you sort of covered it off anyway. So that was nice. So thank you for that. Phil, so 10-second, 15-second elevator pitch, please, about Mio.
Okay, well, Mio is a sales progression and chain management system. It allows information to be shared amongst the market participants, brings real transparency to the transaction, it removes duplication of effort when chasing milestones as well.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. And technology. Does the customer care? Are they really interested? And what's the benefit of the relationship?
Well, because people buy and sell houses so frequently, I don't think they care so much about the exact technology that's used. They just want the transaction to be faster. The position we're generally in at the moment in the industry is that, you know, we're using case management and email, but that's really just the start of the process. That almost brings as much heat as light. It doesn't speed up the transaction. It, you know, allows conveyancers, for example, to actually probably handle more cases. But I think we're now moving to the next phase where we've got, you know, ways of sharing information and real transparency to transactions, which can actually speed up the whole process.
So I know your product. I've been to your offices, head offices, a few years ago. One of the challenges I've always had is that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And of course, if there's an act of parliament and everybody had to use all of the appropriate technology, it would be utopic. But how does it work? Do you find in chains that some of them have got the information and others haven't? How does that manage through?
Well, it does depend on the sort of attitude of the people in the chain. I mean, some agents will phone up and down the chain and do the whole thing. Yeah. And that brings whole benefits to them as well as to the consumers. we've got an awful lot of automated milestones coming in. That's been added all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect process.
But that's the vision and that's the goal, and with more take-up, then that would make the process easier.
Absolutely. You know, more people using it or more people using similar, systems to share information really will help this process speed. Yeah,
that's very good. I certainly know that when I was in agency, if I had a local in my town in Winchester that I hadn't sold through, we would update that agent, that customer as much as our own customer, because I knew their customer wouldn't. And in my mind, I was just prospecting for 7 years' time. It just made sense to update them that way. So again, you could use your product for that. That's great. Mr. Ridgway.
Hello.
Hello. You okay?
Good, thank you.
Good. Nice to see you. I know Ben quite well. So Ben, just an elevator pitch, if that's possible with you, about your company, please.
Well, yeah, of course, Sarah asked for some fizz, so I'm property. So I think that the problem that we have with PropTech, and I think, it's going in the right direction, but people are trying to solve problems in isolation. And actually what needs to happen is it all needs to link together. And I suppose that's the vision that we've got with Iron Property. So we are trying to digitize that process from the start to the finish, from customer onboarding, through title insight, through legal preparation, choosing a conveyancer, and all the way through sales progression. We actually work with TM on that sales progression side of things. So we're all for collaboration, but it all needs to be put together.
Is that possible?
Yes, I think we're making, it's work in progress. We've got over 1,000 agents now using our Move Butler platform. We're not quite there yet. I think there are a number of barriers that we can talk about today that need to come down, change to make it really possible. But certainly with the home buying and selling group forums and the technology subgroup, the right steps are starting to be made. Okay.
So your product, which I know pretty well, how can that benefit the conveyancers in the room, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, our product's primarily aimed at estate agents. We also, though, do the ID on a biometric basis under the Safe Harbour scheme up front, which can be shared with the conveyancer to remove duplication from the process. We have the ability for searches to be ordered in the platform at the start of the process, not when the mortgage offer has come back, creating unnecessary delays. So I think it's very binary. We've got a lot of lawyers in the network who embrace it and are really keen to work with us, and we have a solicitor forum that we listen to and actually develop the product with. But unfortunately, we have a lot of lawyers who just say no, we're not interested, and are not open to that change at the moment. So it'd be great if that view softens over the next few years.
Okay, that's good. And in terms of the consumer, I'm going back to this consumer bit because I'm hearing all of the tech, and it's almost like Turkey's voting for Christmas, asking you to say a bad word about tech as a panel. Yeah. But from a consumer perspective, they put the house on the market. Put the house on the market, and it's a very emotive position for them. Again, Ben, just how do they start to embrace this technology surge that we're seeing? 16 times multiple investment out there in the market that Dan mentioned earlier. How does a consumer actually get to understand what they need and what they don't need?
Well, I think it's got to be super easy for them. And at the moment, it's not. They've still got to log into 3 or 4 different technology portals to get their milestones on, for different suppliers. And, until we remove the barriers, and it is as easy as using your iPhone, it's not going to happen. But, there are lots of companies out there, trying to remove these barriers now. And I thought Dan's speech was really, really good. And he's completely right. There are lots of roots being laid. And hopefully we'll see those fruits in the coming months and years.
Okay. Maybe think of a question for a moment, which I'll open up in a moment. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the other Ben. So thank you, Ben, and to the other Ben.
Yeah, so Landmarks sit across the property transaction cycle, supporting property professionals from the start to the finish, and our aim is to help them fix those problems so that we can deliver faster transactions ultimately.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. And your answer to the question, can technology really improve agent-conveyancer relations and ultimately speed up transactions for the client?
Yes, it definitely can. Ben mentioned it a couple of times there, and Dan as well. It's about bringing lots of different parts together. There's a big challenge there, and that actually takes mindset shift and also systematic change. So everybody coming along with it, not just technology. Technology, I think it was mentioned, in the earlier panel, is a great facilitator. It does speed things up, but it's not the solution on its own.
Yeah.
And if you actually look, transaction times have got longer despite technology, in theory, getting much better over the last 10 years. But that, as Ben mentioned, is really because technology has been in silos, fixing various problems across the chain, but in isolation. And actually, it does need to be pulled together, but that's actually challenging when you've had years of technology built within a system that runs the way ours does now in silos. And that is, that's a big challenge for all of us to try and work on. We all are.
Yeah, and to be honest, one of the elephant in the room is commercials, isn't it? These silos have been built to, to undo them. People want to understand the commercials and make money from it. And, we're trying to make the process easier, not more expensive.
So is it even possible then that companies in the same space can talk to each other?
Well, we talk with TM every single day. TM are a key supplier of our platform. We don't do our own property searches. We partner with TM for it. So I think if the companies have the right mindset and are open to, look, I can't build everything, then absolutely, yes. And slowly that's changing. You've seen Repit's platform open up with the Foundations API, which other CRMs are now following suit on. So I think we're starting to see some change.
Yeah, and Ben Landmark, how many companies do you sort of interact with?
So we touch most transactions at some point, but in the estate agency space, we have about 4,000 agents that we work with on various different bits of tech. But we've had the same challenge as the market has in Landmark's a broad group, and we're trying to pull ourselves together, because if we don't have consistent data that we can pass down the transaction life cycle and help partners, because again we partner with many people and we're fully open to, as well as agents, solicitors, to fix these problems, then it's very unlikely that people are actually commercially separate are going to be able to do that. So we're open to conversations, we have them all the time, and we're trying to get that, that standard, and Dan talked about earlier, an industry standard, so we can all pass data around, because ultimately it's about the consumer and it's about making this process quicker.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Paul, been very patient down there. So, elevator pitch about your company, if that's okay. I'm sure everyone knows, but
yeah, legalised risk profiling business, primarily working with law firms and estate agents, part of the ULS technology group, which builds software to help the home mover. And I also run a high street conveyancer, traditional, that needs the help of all of these people working together to improve that process.
And are you a lawyer?
I'm a solicitor, yeah.
You are. So if you can stop the clock, please, whilst I ask the next question.
I think I did well on 10.
And so the answer to the overall question, can it improve the relationship? Can the customer benefit from it?
Yeah, I think in its component parts, absolutely. There's no doubt, everybody's proven and said it, that technology can take individual parts of the transaction to a quicker place or to a different place. I think we have to remember in the back of this, there are consumers and there are people that want to move house, and they have their own agenda. There is a chain, and that chain will take a life of its own as well, because each individual has an agenda. So all of the technologies that we build have to, as Dan absolutely brilliantly put it, to coexist and work together, but they also have to remember that actually we're taking an individual who's investing probably the largest investment they'll ever make once in 20 years, and they need their hand-holding properly throughout that process.
Right. So everybody's saying it's possible, and yet, although I'm an advocate of tech, obviously I work for the Nurture Group, I'm sort of cynical in that we're trying to bake a cake, and yet everybody seems to have a different ingredient. So another question is it actually possible to digitize the home moving process? So I've got some stats actually about cars. There's 32 million cars on the market, there's 23,000 MOT centres, and there are there's 4 people on average. There's 120,000 practitioners within MOT centres. And with homes, there are 23 million homes, 51,000 estate agents, and 200,000 people. And MOTs are done every year, and yet there's not condition reports or any other factors about the home done at all. It's just not been digitised. So is it possible to integrate tech into the property sector without government mandate? Because Dan mentioned earlier on, didn't he, about the government is opening it up and allowing investment. That's brilliant, but all we've got is more people chucking ingredients into the cake.
I think, Ian, I'll take that on to start with. Before you look at can you digitise the property market, I think you've got to look at its component parts. So, one, is the data in a good enough digital format to do something with?
Yeah.
if you take the lens of consumer relationships with consumers off it and just look at it as a nuts and bolts, process, there are 3 packets of data. You've got protocol forms, you've got title, and you've got searches. Now some of that information is digitized and in actually a really nice format to be able to interpret it, analyze it, and mitigate the risk that you find. Okay. Some of it, however, is not. So, the land registry data has improved. The data extract service, which some of us will use, allows you to interpret that data to a point, but it's not particularly ordered and filtered in a very good way. And because of the dematerialisation of deeds back in 2002, 2003, not all of the information is actually on the land registry portal. Yeah. So you've got to request additional documents, which makes it very, very hard to then take that process much further. So I think we're still away from conveyancing robots, but land registry are working hard and listening to us about what needs to change with their data sets to allow us to do more of that analysis, more of that interpretation, and then to suggest mitigations on risk. I always think there'll be a conveyancer in the process because there's a person on the other end of it. Those risks need to be interpreted and put across to the client. But technology can absolutely get the information in the right place and analyse it on behalf of the conveyancers to reduce the time and make their jobs easier.
Good answer. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Same question. Is it possible to actually integrate tech without government mandate?
Well, I think that you touched on a very, very good point there, which is, if we're talking about credit cards or money or whatever it is, this is a binary transaction. Yeah. So have I bought that? Yes, it goes through to the centre and it credits your account or debits it or whatever it is. The law is, and conveyancing is so many times there's areas of grey where a view has to be taken or advice given for somebody else to be taken. And so much of it is a question of risk. And the big elephant in the room here is, of course, the lenders, isn't it? Because so often it's a question of what attitude to it they're going to take, and it's kind of out of the client's hands. I think we're a very long way from being able to do click to buy and just be able to walk away. That's why we're concentrating on the certainty side of things. It's a straightforward fact that the longer a transaction goes on, the more likely it is that someone in that chain of circumstances are going to change and that chain is going to fall apart, as everybody in the room knows. Providing some way of binding that chain together, it lessens the chances that it's actually going to fall apart. And that's certainly what we're concentrating on at Gazelle. But I agree entirely with what's being said there. The more data you get into the right place is going to speed up the ability with which it's going to be able to be interpreted by the people who need to do it.
Yeah. Okay. I think, Duncan, as well, the other 2 points on that are, is the data accurate and is it served in a timely fashion? So the fact that searches are generally ordered after a mortgage offer has been approved just absolutely delays everything. I'm an absolute advocate of ordering searches right at the forefront. And the challenge you always get back is, well, what if they go out of date? Well, factor it into our commercial model and order some more, So it's absolutely solvable. And I think the final point on accuracy, one of the really, really great things that's come out of the technology subgroup of the home buying and selling working groups is the data schemas for future integrations and looking at the provenance of data and how reliable that data is and whether that's been vouched for by the vendor or whether it's digitally verifiable. And that, from a risk point of view for lenders moving forward, will be really important.
Okay. I think you were going to mention.
Yeah, so it's been touched on. So for me, it's about the risk as well. So we're all I think people are trying to eat the elephant in the room in one big chunk, and I don't think you can. I think it's looking at, so if a house gets transacted 12 months ago, do you really need to go through the 1832 lease again, right? Has anything really changed? No, it's not going to change. So it's understanding that the risk from from the lender, so if it's a mortgage, what's their risk appetite to it? And let's be honest, that's understandable very, very early on. So I might not be able to digitise, or we might not be able to digitise for an unregistered property, absolutely not, because Ben's right, the data's not there. But for something that transacted not so long ago, and it's fairly straightforward, maybe.
Okay.
I think just one thing I'll chuck in there, working with lenders majority of the time, their risk appetite is governed by how much they can pass out to the only person that can actually complete this transaction, and that then does sit very squarely with the conveyancer. So it doesn't matter who else is in this process, doesn't matter what influences they have on the transaction, the tech, there is only one person that can sign or digitally sign the current certificate of title that says to that lender, yes, your money is going to be safe in this particular property. And all of the technologies will help that, and they'll help them form that decision. And the lenders don't really mind too much, as long as there is some insurance policy on the back of that that says, yes, that's absolutely fine.
I think as well, just to add on it, we talk about bringing data forward. It's about bringing the right people in at the right time as well. Yeah. Because you mentioned there that, you know, it relies on a conveyancer to sign it off. We need them involved at the right time, and technology can facilitate that. But again, that's a mindset shift. It's a systematic change. Obviously, Ben, you're heavily involved in the auction space, and that works because we have people and data at the same time. And even if you go across the border to Scotland, their system is much more efficient. It hasn't been technology driven. It's just at what point the parties get involved with the right data. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to open up to the floor for any last questions. I've got one last question. And then if there's anybody, please stick your hands up and there'll be a microphone for you. So bearing in mind that Rightmove, our friends at Rightmove, was a consumer-led revolution. So I was an agent when they founded in 2001, 2002, and didn't go to them at first, and ended up having to go to them because I was losing instructions. Do you think that technology, so to any product that you guys are marketing here, are communicating and educating your route to market well enough?
No.
Okay. Any other questions out on the phone? It's an interesting point, isn't it?
I was just thinking about that. No.
It's an interesting point. So how do you, so therefore, your customers are out in this room here.
Ian,
how do you educate your customers, and how are you educating their customers?
Yeah, but I think it's going to be a behind-the-scenes revolution that will bring transaction times down. I think people are interested in selling their houses and talking to people, and the technology will, you know, that will all happen behind the scenes. So I don't think it's about going out and talking direct to the end consumer. They will just benefit when we get it right.
I think sometimes as well, for educating the industry, it's about putting it in commercial terms. Yeah. You know, if you said being an agent, I have, and actually the main focus is market share. We talked about fees earlier, and hardly anyone will put the fees up. Well, you can make more money by putting the fees up from the same market share, but any tool in this industry that portrays to give you market share or help will sell first and for the most. When actually, if you've got transaction times at whatever we said earlier, 5 months, if you just got your pipeline and said, well, if I turn that into 6 weeks, which it is in Scotland at 95% certainty, which is in Scotland, then I'd be a much wealthier person, or my business is much more successful without actually having to change market share.
You are right. I was in Edinburgh last week, and it is all of the you win your business at time of valuation, because there's very little churn. I think there's a question out there, isn't there? Yeah.
Hi. All of you are selling products that are slightly piecemeal. So if you're a big law firm and you've got technology directors and IT departments and things, you can start to see how they plug in. If you're doing panel work, you tend to be interacting with the same players all the time. When you're a smaller firm, which still makes up the majority of conveyancing, it's very hard to say, it's very easy to say, I love that product, but on the basis that I can't then use it with anyone else because they're not plugged into it, it's very, very hard to come to that level of technology. And when you look at it, transaction times are 15 weeks, 18 weeks, whatever way you want to look at it. All the technology has actually done is lengthen those times, as against Rob and yourself back then, and I'm old enough to know that. You know, transaction times were 12, 8 weeks sometimes. Yeah. So the difference is that we're all doing more work, whether it's imposed by regulation or risk or whatever. So a lot of the time, the technology seems to me, I hate to be donkey about this, but it's actually helping us catch up with what's been imposed. It's never actually started to actually change the way we work, because it's always trying to catch up with where we've been. So I just wonder how the panel feel that they can actually start to get into the gubbins of how it works, rather than just giving me something that solves my problem today.
Get into what? Sorry, I didn't hear that bit.
Get into the gubbins of actually how a transaction works. And I think that was Paul's point. Yeah. Really, at the end of the day, changing what the lawyer does is about changing who else is going to assume the risk. Yeah. Because at the moment, we do. We don't like it, quite happily give it up. But somebody's got to, and until technology helps us to alleviate that risk, it's still going to be us. So I just wonder how these go forwards rather than just catch up to where we are.
Great question. Thank God I'm not on the panel. Who would like to answer it?
I think just to supplement what David's saying as well, that those imposed regulatory obligations that are on the law firms actually create a huge amount of work for them. And actually there is less focus on how can we remove some of those regulatory obligations or divest them perhaps to somebody else and perhaps share the load a little bit.
David, we don't provide services to law firms, but I'll have a go. So, you know, I mean, I think from my point of view, technology splits into two sides. You've got technology in communications, and actually I think that loss of that human touch, that loss of actually talking to people is partly to blame. But I think you've also got technology in making it easier to collect data, interpret data, and so you can make the decision. I personally think that lawyers will be making that decision on risk for a long time to come, but how can we help you get that information in a really easy way without you having to spend hours and hours doing it? I do think, though, that there is a big change coming with the trading standards material information, maybe not with Part A, but with Part B and C looking at restrictive covenants and having to advise clients on the risk on those restrictive covenants up front. For me, hopefully, is a big opportunity to get lawyers involved at the start of the process again, aided by technology. So here's hoping.
Good answer. We've got Mr. Offley speaking about that at some point. Yeah, one more question. Yeah, I've got time for one more. Go for it, Rob. Make it awkward.
Going back to Dan's tree and the roots.
Yes.
What we've got up there now are 60 trees. Are they talking to each other? And will we have one tree or a forest full of trees?
I think it will be a forest of trees where, as a tech company, you kind of realise that, okay, I need to do the next part of the process. Do I want to build that? Maybe not, because it's not our core skill set. So you would then go and integrate with one of the team on here and go, right, so like we integrate with Third Fort, because you guys are the specialist in that area, we're not. But then it brings a better system for the end users. So I think it will be a forest of trees, and yeah, we are, laying roots massively at the minute. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Are those forests of trees going to actually listen to what the conveyancers need? Because very often the technologies that we get, and I'm sitting on both sides of the fence in this, because very often the technologies that get offered to us are great, but they don't necessarily actually solve the problem.
Solving a problem that agents
and Peter,
didn't realise they had.
I think that's really interesting. So I've got our two product managers for our platform sat here listening to you guys. Give us a wave, girls. And, they both run forums with agents and solicitors listening to exactly what you guys are saying about how our technology needs to change, adapt for changing regulations and making the improvements required. So yes, but, clearly things can always happen faster. But, technology is not that easy. It's quite difficult to get it right. So,
Good. Right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. Really good, informative session. So thanks for participating. Cheers. Thanks a lot.